Well, hello friends, and welcome to another Ask Zach. I hope you are doing well. Today we're going to talk about Telecaster tone and how hardware and changes in hardware affects that. Also, I'm going to talk a little bit about Bill Hullett, who's the guy that played that lick that I just played. That was from Radney Foster's Just Call Me Lonesome, that was written by Radney Foster and George Dukas. And while you're thinking about it, if you've been enjoying the show, please subscribe. And if you've subscribed already and you'd like to support the show, we'll go to AskZach.com and you can go to the store and you can pick up a fun t-shirt like this one that says "It's a Sickness." That's talking about this whole obsession with guitars. Or, there's a tip jar, there's mugs, all sorts of things, but I appreciate that. All right, Telecaster tone and how hardware affects that. So, as I said in my Why the Telecaster is the Best Electric Guitar Ever video, I learned a lot about Telecasters from Brad Paisley, who, he and I were, we're still friends. We were college buddies back in the early 90s at Belmont University. And we each had a couple of Telecasters. And we would swap necks and hardware and all sorts. And there were times where I had one of my Tele bodies with one of his necks on it and stuff like that. And we did all sorts of crazy things because we were trying to learn about guitar tone and learning how much of the tone would move as the neck moved. And, as we, swapped necks, it seemed like the tone would kind of follow the neck, to a degree. But then there's all these other factors, and we started learning about these things. So this is kind of an overview of my understanding of Telecaster hardware and how I feel it affects the tone. And so everyone has their own idea of what the ideal guitar tone is, and that's great. So, I know tone is subjective, but these are my thoughts. All right, first we're going to talk about bridges. So my favorite bridge is just this, vintage style, ashtray, bridge. I think, this is a Danocaster, so it has Dan Strain's, version of that's made by a company here in Nashville. But the one that Fender makes currently that I picked up for $10 for my JV Telecaster back there, I think those are fantastic. You can go to, to bigger bridges. Like, this was a very popular mod in the late 70s and all through the 80s. It was very popular to put a heavy six-saddle bridge to replace, an ashtray. Now, first off, you can see there's a big size difference and there's a huge weight difference. This weighs a couple ounces and this weighs, sometimes, depending on how thick the plate is and how big the saddles are on some of these, they can weigh almost a half a pound. So they can add a lot of weight. Now this Goto one, it is solid brass that is chrome plated. And so what I feel that it does when you put this type of bridge on a guitar, especially one that's had like an ashtray type thing, is all of a sudden the guitar has more shoulder to it. It becomes more modern sounding. It has more low end. It has more sustain. It's more assertive, but it loses some of the, kind of clangy, doinky qualities that a Tele has. Pete Anderson used this bridge a lot because he felt like he would lose twang to a degree, but he gained more of a steel guitar sound. And, and that's true. Like Keith Richards uses this type of bridge, but an older one made by Schecter. But again, it's all brass. And he would put those on his guitars, and he liked the tone better. So you'll notice that when Keith plays a Tele, which is what he plays most of the time, if you notice, it always has this kind of bridge, whether it's plated, chrome plated, or whether it's the raw brass. So these will give a guitar, Telecaster, a little bit more authority. And it makes it a little louder, a little more sustain. one of my friends, Michael Ross, that is a writer for Premier Guitar and Guitar Player magazine, a great player and great writer. He and I were talking about these bridges, and he said it's almost like you took a regular Tele and you put an RC booster on there. And it immediately makes it sound more modern, a little bigger. And that's what this does, except you can't, turn it off and on. There are guitars that I like these bridges on, and I have nothing against these bridges. Joe Glaser used these all through the 80s and 90s, on all those Bender installs. So Ricky Skaggs and Steve Warner and on and on and on. Jimmy Olander, they were all, playing through these kind of bridges, and no one's saying that their Telecaster didn't sound twangy. It's a good bridge, and that's what I have on my Kabiki, on my B-Bender, because it was one that Joe did an install in the 90s, and so it has this kind of bridge. And Brent Mason's guitar has this bridge on it, and so it's a good bridge, and sometimes it's what you want. Sometimes you don't want the doinkiness. Sometimes you want to have, more authority to the note. Also, another thing you can do is you can stick with this type of bridge, but you can get one that's made of thicker steel, and that will start to be kind of splitting the difference. So you can get a little bit more authority, but without, full on going this way. Because this way is also a little more compressed sounding because of all the brass. So, and the great thing about doing these is you can do this without modifying your guitar. Now, of course, there are some American standards that have a different layout for the mounting holes, in which, of course, you're going to have to be careful about getting the right bridge. But that's one of the great things about swapping bridges, is that you can do it and just see what it does to the sound, and see whether you like it or not. Okay, so let's get more down in the nitty gritty, and let's talk about saddles. Now, this Danocaster has brass saddles, and I'm just going to talk about brass and steel only. I'm not going to go into aircraft aluminum and all sorts of other esoteric materials that have been used. Nothing wrong with that, but steel and brass are really the most common ones, and they're the two that I use the most. I tend to either use one or the other, and I don't think that one's better than the other. Depending on what's going on with the guitar and what I want the guitar to do, I will change that out. So brass saddles will tend to make the guitar a little less bright and a little more compressed. Some people, describe it as being, sweeter sounding. But it's really good for a guitar that maybe has, you feel like it has a little too much high end, and you're not able to, you don't like what happens when you dial back the tone control on there and you want to try something different. And again, saddles are not expensive. And I've really been enjoying the Advanced Plating here in Nashville has been making these saddles. They're grooved and compensated, and they have both steel and brass. They cost about $30, and they're sold by a company called Philadelphia Luthery. And Dan Strain uses them on a lot of the Danocasters. This was actually a set of all parts saddles, but I'm actually thinking about trying those, the grooved ones. Because what I don't like about these saddles is when they're compensated and they're angled, the string ends up kind of moving around because of the fact that it's angled. And so it has, if it were straight, it wouldn't move around as much, but it just seems to do that. And then you can kind of notch it, but then notching it can be kind of problematic. So anyway, so brass is if you want to kind of tame a guitar, kind of smooth it out, give it a little more compression. Steel, on the other hand, which I also really like, steel kind of livens up the guitar, and it kind of has this upper mid spike to it, and and it's a much more lively saddle. And again, some people don't like those. Some people think they're too bright. To me, it kind of depends on the guitar. So again, I'll try different saddles. it's kind of hard not to mention this right now. So I'm going to, and I could do a whole episode just on pickups, but I'm just going to give a little overview on pickups, and that's, flat pull piece, pickups where the magnets are flush with the top of the bobbin. They tend to sound more even. And so you're going to get, if you want to have the darkest, kind of smoothest Telecaster, you want a flat pull pickup with brass saddles. That's going to tend to have the smoothest sound. If you want to have the most lively sound, get a staggered pull bridge pickup and have steel saddles. And that will be a very dynamic sounding guitar. So that's another thing that, you can certainly do is swap out, in between, a flat pull or a staggered pull pickup. So again, there's so many things you can do with these, because these are, they're parts guitars, whether it's an actual Fender or this Danocaster or whatever. I mean, they're a bunch of parts, and you can change these things, and it's like being able to change the recipe, and and it's great in that you can change out bridges, you can change out saddles and stuff. It's interesting in that, like Dan Strain, who made this guitar, he actually is not a big fan of Blackguards in general. He prefers, mid-50s tellies or 60s tellies. He likes steel saddles, and he likes a staggered pull, bridge pickup. And because he likes that liveliness. And of course, he comes from more of a rock and pop and kind of jangly, rock, background, because he and his wife were in a band that was signed to a major label. And he's done a bunch of record production and stuff like that. And so, he knows what he wants from a guitar, and that's what he wants from it. So now he makes great Blackguards and people like them, but it's funny that that's not his preference. And yet you'll see other people that, all they want is, a flat pole pickup, and they'll put brass saddles on everything. I've seen tons of guys that have taken 60s tellies with with steel saddles, and they've put, brass ones on there. And that's fine. Okay. Another thing that's not thought about a lot is how much tuners actually change the tone. So, and what it really changes the tone is it's changing the mass and the weight of the headstock. So, of course, vintage type tuners like these Kluson type, it's a very lightweight tuner, and it doesn't add a lot of weight to the headstock, and it allows, a certain type of resonance. Well, as soon as you start adding weight, especially if you put like something heavy like a Schaller tuning machine on there, you're going to change the way the guitar sounds, and it sustains. And as you tend to put more mass on the guitar, bigger bridges, heavier tuning machines, it tends to skew things to where it becomes more about the fundamental of the note and less about the airy harmonic. So the lighter weight tuning machines like the Kluson type and the little bridge, the lightweight bridge, you tend to get more harmonics and other things going on. And if you put heavy machine heads and a heavy bridge, you get more fundamental, and this Telecaster becomes more of a hammer. But that's what Ray Flack did with his 68 Telly that he played on all those, Ricky Skaggs things. They had, Schaller machine heads and a big Gotoh bridge. That's what Keith Richard has done. He's got Sperzel machine heads. Brent Mason, he's got Sperzel machine heads and the Gotoh bridge. There's tons of guys that have used that to good effect. I do prefer the Kluson type machine heads. That's not to say a guitar is not going to sound good if it has heavy machine heads on it, but that's my preference. I like lightweight tuners, and I like a lightweight, bridge, and then I like to either use brass or steel, just depending on what direction I want to go in with the guitar. So anyway, so that's kind of my overview. I think at some point I'll probably do one on guitar woods, the woods that are used for the body and the neck. But that'll be another episode. So The lick I played at the beginning was played by Bill Hullett. And Bill Hullett is referred to as Mr. Telecaster by Joe Glaser. And he was probably the first guy in Nashville to really be serious about Blackguards and what was going on. Not that there weren't some guys that had played them in Nashville before that, but he was the first one to really understand what was going on with Blackguards. And he had a real 51 Nocaster that he played with, and that was his main guitar for many, 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 many years. And he kind of brought that understanding to Joe Glaser and other people here in Nashville, understand what the big deal was about Blackguards. And just for that reason alone, he deserves our respect. But then he is and was a great player. And I had the pleasure of meeting him. Unfortunately, it was at Reggie Young's memorial service, but I met Bill, and he was a very, very kind man. And he has a great playing style. Tend to use either blackface or tweed Fender amps. And he had his 51 Nocaster that he strung with Ernie Ball 9 through 42s. And he did all these cool licks. And I think one of the greatest compliments that Bill ever got was kind of a strange one from Pete Anderson. And that's it. Pete Anderson heard that lick, the opening lick that I played for Just Call Me Lonesome, and he thought that he played that. And at the end of the day, that's kind of the greatest compliment you can give, is that you think someone played something like yourself. So, I just think that's a great, great lick. It's in the key of E, and you have the... It's just a cool lick, especially this part, though. And it almost sounds like he's, instead of sliding up, it almost sounds like he's going, which that's really cool. So that's a really, really cool lick. And I'm going to do, make sure and check out, I'll put a link to my website, and I'll have some more information on Bill Hullett and some like a Spotify, a couple of tracks he's played on and such, and maybe some more information about him. Just, his 51 Nocaster was bought by Nacho, and Nacho made him a copy of that guitar. And Bill was certainly helpful in helping Nacho learn about Blackguards, and wrote one of the forwards to the Blackguard book and everything. One other lick from that song, which I think that Just Call Me Lonesome is kind of a great textbook. Over the 5 chord, over that B, he does this. And I've just used that, I've used that all over the place. And I just think that's great, because you're just playing. So, there you have it. Hope you've enjoyed today's episode talking about Telecaster tone and hardware, and a bit about the great Bill Hullett. Hope you'll check him out, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.